细的一直去感受它的差别，才会觉得说真的是有比 iPad Air 再更加的灵敏，跟那个压。星星，大家看到标题应该就知道我要暂时跟台中说再见了。今天呢是7月29号，等一下下午搬家公司就要来打包我们整个房子的东西，我们就会正式的离开这间房子，离开台中这个城市。在台中，我从读大学到现在，其实历经了真的很多个重要。
My advice is to scroll through the different blend modes to see what each one does. I think the multiply blend mode creates a pretty fun effect here, but for now, let's just set it back to normal. Tapping on a layer will invoke a menu with several options. You can rename the layer, select its contents, fill the layer with color, and more. Masks are another powerful tool that allow you to control where you can and can't draw within your piece. They also allow you to hide or conceal parts of your image without erasing. Let's add some texture and detail to this leaf. Turn off visibility of layer 2 with the pink flower. Tap on layer 1 to select it. Select the dark green from your palette. Let's choose a different brush. Find the industrial set and choose the concrete block brush. Now, if you were to try painting in some texture to this leaf shape, you'd have a pretty hard time getting it perfectly inside. Let's two-finger tap to undo that. Open the Layers panel, tap the layer, then tap Alpha Lock from the menu. You'll know Alpha Lock is enabled because a checkerboard pattern will appear in the layer preview. With Alpha Lock turned on, I cannot make any new marks on this layer except where I've already drawn. This feature makes it super easy to add the texture to just the leaf shape. Now we'll use a clipping mask to add some veins to that leaf on a new layer. Open the Layers panel and tap the plus sign to create a new layer. New layers are always created directly above the layer you had selected. Go back and select the syrup brush from the inking set again. Then draw some veins. It's perfectly fine that these lines are extending over the edge of the shape. Open the Layers panel, tap Layer 3 to open the Options menu, then tap Clipping Mask. Clipping masks are a lot like Alpha Lock where I can't draw outside the shape, but the clipping mask allows you to do this on a separate layer. This means I can manipulate these vein details independently of the leaf. For example, I can use a blend mode on this layer to control how the veins interact with the leaf. Tap N on that layer and slide through the different options. Multiply will have a darkening effect. Scroll down until you get to screen. This blend mode will have a lightening effect, and I think that looks pretty good. Let's merge the two leaf elements together. You can merge layers by pinching them together. Merging layers is useful if you start running out of layers. There is a maximum number of layers you can use in any given artwork. The maximum layer count is dictated by two things. One, how much RAM is in your iPad. More RAM equals more layers. Two, the resolution of your canvas. A lower resolution also equals more layers. Turn on the pink flower layer so we can add some details using Alpha Lock. Another way to turn on Alpha Lock is by taking two fingers and swiping to the right on the layer. I use Alpha Lock a lot, so this is a really handy gesture. Select the bright pink from your color palette. Draw a dot in the middle and then some lines going outward. There's one more type of mask, and that is the layer mask. I have a tutorial all about masks if you want to learn more. Now let's learn about the selection tool. We're going to make a selection around this yellow flower. In the layers menu, hide the pink flower layer and then select layer 1. The selection tool is this S-shaped icon over on the left. Tap it and you'll see a bar appear at the bottom. I use the freehand option most. With it, you can tap, tap, tap to make a selection or draw it by hand. Close the selection by tapping this gray dot. Right now, the flower is on the same layer as the leaf, but I want it to be on its own layer. To do this, we'll use the copy-paste menu. With the flower selected, swipe down with 3 fingers on the canvas. This will invoke the copy-paste menu. There are several options such as cut, copy, duplicate, but we're going to use the cut and paste option. Go back to the layers menu, and now you'll see the yellow flower has been cut from layer 2 and pasted into a new layer. You should note that anytime you paste something, it will always be placed onto its own layer. Let's turn back on the pink flower layer and create another new layer. We're going to use the selection tool to draw another flower shape using color fill. Tap the selection icon, tap color fill in the bottom bar. Draw a U shape, then tap, tap, tap to make a tulip. Because color fill is enabled, and create this, tap it and you'll see a bar appear. The tutorial resolution, start run the leaf. For example, I can use a blend mode on this layer to control how the veins interact with the leaf. Tap N on that layer and slide through the different options. Multiply will have a darkening effect. Scroll down until you get to screen. This blend mode will have a lightening effect, and I think that looks pretty good. Let's merge the 2 leaf elements together. You can merge layers by pinching them together. Merging layers is useful if you start running out of layers. There is a maximum number of layers you can use in any given artwork. The maximum layer count is dictated by 2 things. 1, how much RAM is in your iPad. More RAM equals more layers. 2, the resolution of your canvas. A lower resolution also equals more layers. Turn on the pink flower layer so we can add some details using Alpha Lock. Another way to turn on Alpha Lock is by taking 2 fingers and swiping to the right on the layer. I use Alpha Lock a lot, so this is a really handy gesture. Select the bright pink from your color palette. Draw a dot in the middle and then some lines going outward. There's one more type of mask, and that is the layer mask. I have a tutorial all about masks if you want to learn more. Now let's learn about the selection tool. We're going to make a selection around this yellow flower. In the layers menu, hide the pink flower layer and then select layer 1. The selection tool is this S-shaped icon over on the left. Tap it and you'll see a bar appear at the bottom. I use the freehand option most. With it, you can tap, tap, tap to make a selection or draw it by hand. Close the selection by tapping this gray dot. Right now, the flower is on the same layer as the leaf, but I want it to be on its own layer. To do this, we'll use the copy-paste menu. With the flower selected, swipe down with 3 fingers, way to turn off. They also allow you to hide or conceal parts of your image without erasing. Let's add some texture and detail to this leaf. Turn off, interact with each other. It can get a little complicated, but my advice is to scroll through the different blend modes to see what each one does. I think the multiply blend mode creates a pretty fun effect here, but for now, let's just set it back to normal. Tapping on a layer will invoke a menu with several options. You can rename the layer, select its contents, fill the layer with color, and more. Masks are another powerful tool that allow you to control where you can and can't draw within your piece. They also allow you to hide or conceal parts of your image without erasing. Let's add some texture and detail to this leaf. Turn off visibility of layer 2 with the pink flower. Tap on layer 1 to select it. Select the dark green from your palette. Let's choose a different brush. Find the industrial set and choose the concrete block brush. Now, if you were to try painting in some texture to this leaf shape, you'd have a pretty hard time getting it perfectly inside. Let's two-finger tap to undo that. Open the Layers panel, tap the layer, then tap Alpha Lock from the menu. You'll know Alpha Lock is enabled because a checkerboard pattern will appear in the layer preview. With Alpha Lock turned on, I cannot make any new marks on this layer except where I've already drawn. This feature makes it super easy to add the texture to just the leaf shape. Now we'll use a clipping mask to add some veins to that leaf on a new layer. Open the Layers panel and tap the plus sign to create a new layer. New layers are always created directly above the layer you had selected. Go back and select the syrup brush from the inking set again. Then draw some veins. It's perfectly fine that these lines are extending over the edge of the shape. Open the Layers panel, tap Layer 3 to open the Options menu, then tap Clipping Mask. Clipping masks are a lot like Alpha Lock where I can't draw outside the shape, but the clipping mask allows you to do this on a separate layer. This means I can manipulate these vein details independently of the leaf. For example, I can use a blend mode on this layer to control how the veins interact with the leaf. Tap N on that layer and slide through the different options. Multiply will have a darkening effect. Scroll down until you get to Screen. This blend mode will have a lightening effect, and I think that looks pretty good. Let's merge the two leaf elements together. You can merge layers by pinching them together. Merging layers is useful if you start running out of layers. There is a maximum number of layers you can use in any given artwork. The maximum layer count is dictated by two things. One, how much RAM is in your iPad. More RAM equals more layers. Two, the resolution of your canvas. A lower resolution also equals more layers. Turn on the pink flower layer so we can add some details using Alpha Lock. Another way to turn on Alpha Lock is by taking two fingers and swiping to the right on the layer. I use Alpha Lock a lot, so this is a really handy gesture. Select the bright pink from your color palette. Draw a dot in the middle and then some lines going outward. There is one more type of mask, and that is the layer mask. I have a tutorial all about masks if you want to learn more. Now let's learn about the selection tool. We're going to make a selection around this yellow flower. In the Layers menu, hide the pink flower layer, and then select Layer 1. The selection tool is this S-shaped icon over on the left. Tap it, and you'll see a bar appear at the bottom. I use the freehand option most. With it, you can tap, tap, tap to make a selection or draw it by hand. Close the selection by tapping this gray dot. Right now, the flower is on the same layer as the leaf, but I want it to be on its own layer. To do this, we'll use the Copy-Paste menu. With the flower selected, swipe down with 3 fingers on the canvas. This will invoke the Copy-Paste menu. There are several options such as Cut, Copy, Duplicate, but we're going to use the Cut and Paste option. Go back to the Layers menu, and now you'll see the yellow flower has been cut from layer 2 and pasted into a new layer. You should note that anytime you paste something, it will always be placed onto its own layer. Let's turn back on the pink flower layer and create another new layer. We're going to use the selection tool to draw another flower shape using Color Fill. Tap the selection icon, tap Color Fill in the bottom bar. Draw a U shape, then tap, tap, tap to make a tulip. Because Color Fill is enabled, that selection will automatically fill with whatever color you've got selected in the color picker. You can even change the color on the fly. Let's choose a nice orange for this flower. Tap the selection icon again to deselect. There are several ways to make selections. First, let's disable Color Fill by tapping it. You can also make rectangular or elliptical selections. Make an elliptical selection near the bottom of this orange flower. There's an option to feather or soften edges of your selection. Feather to about 25%. Open the Layers menu and make another new layer. In the color picker, we're going to pick like a red-orange. Go back to Layers, tap the layer, and then choose Fill Layer. You can use the Fill Layer feature to fill an entire layer with color, or just a selection like I have here. Tap this layer again and then choose Clipping Mask. Now this flower has a nice gradient effect. Let's merge those together. Tap the top layer and choose Merge Down to merge those two layers together. Now the thing I use the selection tool the most for is selecting parts of my artwork to move around using the Transform tool. Let's learn about that next. The Transform tool lets you move and manipulate parts of your artwork around the canvas. It's this little arrow icon. Tap it, and by default, it will select the entire contents of the selected layer. This bounding box will appear around the selection. Start by choosing Freeform in the bar that appears at the bottom of the screen. You can move the selection around with your pencil or your finger. You can also resize and stretch it by pulling on one of these blue nodes. To resize uniformly, pinch inside of the bounding box, or tap over to the Uniform Transform mode. This mode will preserve the proportions of your image. Take a look at the bounding box and you'll see two different handles. The green one lets you rotate the selection, and the yellow one lets you rotate the bounding box itself. Tap Snapping, then turn on Magnetics, which will give you guidelines that help you move in a straight line horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. If you were to turn on Snapping, your content will snap to align to things like the center point of your canvas or other objects. There are also options to flip and rotate. Distort lets you shear your selection, creating tilt and perspective effects. And the Warp Transform tool uses a mesh grid to manipulate. Drag anywhere on this mesh to pull, wrap, or fold. Tap this reset button to undo all the transformations. Let's tap back over to Uniform mode. Let's use the Selection and Transform tools to arrange these flowers. Because each flower is on its own layer, all you have to do is select the layer, then choose the Transform tool, and move them where you want them to be. I think this piece would look good with another leaf. Go to the Layers menu and swipe to the left on the leaf layer. Here, you'll see an option to duplicate the layer. With that new layer selected, use the Transform tool to move it, resize it, flip it, and rotate it. You can move multiple layers at once. Swipe right on each layer to select multiple layers at a time. Then we can move all of the layers to center them on the canvas. Let's add some stems to our flowers. Create a new layer for the stems. I want the stems to be behind the flowers, so this layer needs to be under the flower layers. Tap, hold, and drag the layer down. Let's say I want my stems to be perfectly straight. There's a tool for that, and it's called Quicklime. Select the lighter green color.
盘点那些丑态百出的武术大师。
今天挑战断砖，断上瘾了。我下面表演千斤坠，你看过吗？刚发明的。气沉丹田，这时候就真的是可以气沉丹田了。啊，气沉丹田。
来，你吹下刀。不管对方力气有多大，在太极的陷阱里面的技法来说，都完全可以反弹给那个。 来吧。哎，你叫什么？哎，你过来，过来啊，过来。哎，记得照我过来，近点，看着啊，不准打我。师傅，还没准备好是吧？就胆敢直说到手刀。哎呦我的妈！你给我叫！酒儿，这气好喝，牛逼 class。
Really surprising results here on Zero, and dare I say it, diamonds are not forever.
Absolutely, Jumana. They're not forever. And we have seen the new president, Duma Boko, take office. And unlike other places on the continent where for a victory this resounding, there'd been pomp, color, red carpet rolled out, it was a very simple swearing-in ceremony in an office. And he gave quite an impassioned speech after he was sworn in. He acknowledged the current state of the country, saying he dare not fail and disappoint the people, saying he's going to do everything within his power to ensure that he delivers on the promises that his administration made while they were campaigning to get into office. He also put his human rights background into office, saying that he acknowledges that there are diverse views in the countries, which he welcomes, and says that he wants the citizenry to support and bridge to keep the politicians alert. We also saw the outgoing president do a press conference immediately. It was clear that they were losing the election, and he said the evidence is overwhelming and they've massively lost the election. And in a very light moment, he said he wasn't expecting it. He hadn't even packed a shoe. But on a serious note, said that they're going to do everything to ensure that there's a peaceful transition and this government succeeds. We've also seen the former president, Iekama, say that this resounding defeat was because of policies that are not people-centered. So the opposition party, which is now the ruling party, centered on that, capitalized on bread and butter issues to address the current challenges and needs of the people. So the ball is now in their court to see if they live up to the expectations.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is big ahead. And I said diamonds are not forever, namely because Botswana relies so much on the sale of diamonds. But it hasn't been a good couple of years because of weakness of demand coming out of China, oversupply issues, etc., lab-grown, the emergence of lab-grown diamonds as well. to what extent is that going to cast a shadow over the issues that the new governments are going to have to deal with? Because the economy is very reliant on diamonds. How can they sort of break the stronghold?
Jumana, that is the million-dollar question. In fact, in his outgoing speech, we heard former President Mokgweetsi Masisi say that the economy is going to be a challenge to the new administration. They are projected to grow by only 2%. And if you look at key indicators like unemployment, 28% amongst the youth, there's corruption, there's rising insecurity. And we saw the President, Duma Boko, say that they're going to work on diversifying the economy. Of course, diamonds are a great source of income, but they've not been living up to expectations. And you also have things like tourism, but it's time to inject some more vibrancy into that economy. And if we just stay with diamond, the former administration signed a $751 million deal with De Beers that they were not happy about, and they even threatened to walk away. We are likely to see President Duma Boko try to rebuild those relationships, patch things up, because it says we have to protect the goose that lays golden eggs while they pursue alternative ways of diversifying the economy.
Half an hour away from the Opens in Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Shanghai. You're watching the China Show. I'm Yvonne Van with David and Glass.
Good Monday morning. Here we go. Our top stories today: the dollar under pressure and Asian stocks trading cautiously, but traders bracing for volatility, of course, around this big week. You have U.S. presidential elections, of course, very much in focus. Now, a flurry, speaking of new polls, signal a tight finish as Kamala Harris and Donald Trump blitz the swing states, making their final pitches to voters. And China takes further steps to attract global investors ahead of the U.S. elections, easing restrictions on foreign capital as top legislators meet in Beijing.
It feels like the countdown has begun for weeks now, but we are really coming down to the wire when it comes to this U.S. election. We're just about 2 days away from what could be quite volatile. And you're already seeing that volatility being priced in some of these FX markets here as we count down to that big day. So certainly there's one thing to watch. The dollar is weakening. That's probably the most noteworthy thing, just given what Dave mentioned, that some polls are suggesting maybe that Harris is having a slight win here right now. You're seeing some of these Trump trades retreating a little bit. So the dollar yields as well. You take a look at that jobs report and the reaction that we saw in the Treasury market. You know, it was the weakest print that we saw in jobs since 2020, the days of the pandemic. Treasuries rallied and then completely reversed that move. So it seems like right now it's politics outweighing the economics here, and you're starting to see that. But Japanese markets are shut, so we're not seeing treasuries trade, but bond futures are slightly in the positive territory here this morning. You're also seeing that retreat in the dollar, in the yen as well. We're at 152 levels here. Stocks seem to be quite resilient, right? So if you're seeing where the angst is, it's mostly going to be in currency markets, not so much when you take a look at stocks. Credit, for example. Gold is also slightly retreating, but not too much as well. Interesting to know about Brent. So oil is rising after OPEC did, in fact, delay that output hike by a month. So this is the second delay that we've seen to revive supply. So certainly that's one to watch here this morning as well. But yeah, we talk about these Trump trades, right? So if you look at what everything from the steepeners to Bitcoin to the peso, to VIX futures. Guys, can we get back to that previous chart first? You're starting to see a little bit of a retreat, right? And it was interesting how people are really gaming this here right now. When it comes to the Mexican peso, for example, looked to be one of the more vulnerable sorts of trades here leading up to this election. We're trading around 20 levels here right now. JP Morgan had some interesting notes saying we might get to 22 levels if Trump is elected, 19 if Harris wins, but still saying that knee-jerk reaction is similar to what we might see in 2016, which could actually prove temporary, according to JP Morgan. But there you go, Bitcoin also retreating just a little bit. And the renminbi side of things here, that also is the currency to watch the next few days after we have seen basically yuan volatility spike up to record highs, basically, when it comes to 1 week implied vol. Soaring here this morning. You take a look when it comes to how the approach the open is looking like. Stocks, you can take a look at it. They're not quite seeing that sort of nerves leading up to this election, right? We've actually seen futures are up here this morning. We have this NBC Standing Committee to meet here throughout the week, so we might get some details here. There seems to be this growing narrative that if Trump wins, we might see more stimulus and more upside surprises, and maybe that's why equities are still quite upbeat right now. 7-11 for the currency, Dave.
Yeah, as you point out, right, we are really starting to see, or at least feel it in markets, mostly in the currency markets so far, not so much equity markets, which is why perhaps when we look, as we go into the trading session today, it's certainly worth noting Hong Kong, for example, coming into this week, Hong Kong stocks are down 4 straight weeks. That's the longest in about 13 months as far as the weekly streak goes. All that being said, though, the retracement hasn't been all the way back down. So that's, I think, point number one. Point number two, to Yvonne's point, there is a meeting that begins today. Let's have a look at the agenda, please, if we can. November 4th to 8th. And of course, you look at stock volatility and you do a spread between where you are in Hong Kong against, say, the VIX. There is a slight premium there still, which I guess in many, many ways underscores, if you had to ask Hong Kong and Chinese investors what's more important, elections or any stimulus, it's probably the stimulus, which is perhaps going to give a little bit more give as far as that goes. Earnings as far as Young China goes, but apart from that, yeah, we are on election watch.
Yep. And of course, as we talk about U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump remain deadlocked in opinion polls ahead of Election Day. And a flurry of new surveys has them neck and neck nationally and across the battleground states that will decide the outcome. Let's get to our Atlanta Bureau Chief, Brett Pulley. He's joining us now. It seems like this is going to be kind of at the end of the day, it comes down to some sort of photo finish, Brett. But are we likely to actually get an outcome by Wednesday, Asia time, if in fact it is, the polls suggest how tight this race is?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, many people expect that we very well might not have an outcome for some number of hours. Maybe Wednesday morning if, some of these swing states all really break in one direction. But I don't think that it will be terribly surprising if it takes some time, a day, 2 days, 3 days, who knows what. We expect, certainly there are some legal challenges in place and some things in place, depending on what the outcome is, that could delay the final certification of the vote. But we'll have to see. As you said, it is neck and neck. And here in Georgia, especially the last few days, over the weekend, the candidates have been sort of fighting down to the wire. Former President Donald Trump was here in Macon today. Vice President Kamala Harris was joined by a host of celebrities here in Atlanta on Saturday. And so, once again, Georgia, the state of Georgia, is playing a pivotal role in this election. Voters have been coming out for early voting in record numbers. Nearly 4 million people have voted already before the early voting deadline ended this past Friday. And that's out of 7.2 million active voters in the state. So the early turnout has even led some to predict that some polling places on Tuesday might be a little slower than usual.
And Brett, you mentioned, and we're looking at live pictures of Donald Trump right now. And, I want to ask you about how, if at all, and we talk about how close this one looks on the surface, and I'm wondering whether the messaging or the level of urgency in both camps may have changed given that reality as we go into the final leg here.
Yeah, well, I think the numbers are so close that both candidates certainly see opportunity here in Georgia. For the former president to spend as much time as he has in recent days in Fulton County really speaks volumes. Fulton County is where the city of Atlanta is located, overwhelmingly Democratic. And but the president, the former president, I should say, I think sees an opportunity. And obviously the vice president as well. They're really, I would say the last few weeks here, the advertising has been so relentless, and a lot of it has really been relentlessly focused on male voters, black and white. It's been almost impossible for the last several weeks to watch the top-ranked University of Georgia Bulldogs football team or the NFL's resurging Atlanta Falcons. You cannot watch those games without being constantly bombarded with ads from both campaigns. So it's, clearly they have a target there. And the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the local paper here, estimated that in just the final 7 days of the race, the two camps will spend a combined total of $24 million advertising just in the state of Georgia.
Brett, thank you so much for just getting us up to speed, really, and especially where you are, to your point there, Brett Pulley there in Atlanta for us. The other top story we're tracking, of course, here in this part of the world is the meeting, of course, that begins today in Beijing. China's top legislative body will be meeting to talk us through, and maybe we'll get more details on this massive fiscal push. It's going to be massive. Is it going to be massive? I think it's a question there. Let's bring in Min Lo, our China correspondent, to give us a preview, really, of what to expect. The meeting starts today, and of course, at the end of this week.
Yeah, we're not likely to get any news until Friday, possibly by evening time. And this is really something investors have been looking forward to pretty much since September, when PBOC announced the stimulus. And the market expectations had been drummed up so much. It's now, between 6 to 10 trillion yuan in additional bond issuance to tackle local government debt and to buy up idle property and land. But of course, key to watch, the wild card here is whether there will be any additional stimulus targeted directly at boosting consumption that is beyond what we have heard so far around that equipment upgrading program, for instance. And when it comes to those debt issuance, what's key to watch is whether it's going to be local governments, or rather how much of it is going to be from local governments and how much from the central government. Because if it's local governments that are issuing these bonds to refinance their own off-balance sheet debt, then essentially that isn't really a fiscal expansion, right? It isn't really the same as pumping money into the economy. But if it's the central government, though, that is issuing treasury bonds, then I think that is going to be welcomed by markets. It would basically symbolize a shifting of debt burden from local governments to the central government.
In the meantime, though, even ahead of these U.S. elections, we're seeing at least curbs being at least loosened when it comes to attracting investment to the country.
Yeah, and the timing is interesting, as you said, coming just days ahead of the U.S. election, and also coming after foreign direct investment into the country has really been very lackluster over the last few quarters. So some significant loosening of rules here. Individual foreign investors can now invest as strategic investors into Chinese companies. They only need to have a minimum of $300 million, down from $500 million. They can participate in tender offers, not just private placements and transfer by agreements. And the lockup period is reduced from 3 years to 1 year. So it's quite significant here, but the question is whether it will be effective in attracting more investors into China, just given the sentiment around the economy right now.
All right, thank you, Min Lo, there joining us now. On what to expect this week, certainly lots of key events to watch out for. We're also watching what's going on in Korea. So you're actually seeing Korean markets up some 1% in the Kospi here right now. There is this plan from the opposition party agreeing to scrap this tax on capital gains. This is something that the president, Yoon Suk-yeol, has pledged. And a bid to really boost investor sentiment and also stock values here. So that's why you're seeing quite a bit of optimism here this morning.
Yeah, which I think we should underscore, given the backdrop of everything else that's on the deck today. This is really standing out as a market where you are at least seeing some movement in the early goings this Monday morning. Right. In fact, just on that very note here, coming up here on the China Show, a closer look at, U.S.-China tensions, this relationship, this dynamic between the two as Washington gears up for a leadership transition. Tsinghua University senior fellow and retired PLA senior Colonel Joe Bo joining us in the next hour, along with Scott Kennedy from the CSIS. But first, and ahead of that, we talk all things fixed income strategy with Mireille Asset Global Investments. On the back of that, aberration, question mark of the jobs report, ahead of the elections as well. Counting down to the open of trade, the first sessions of the week, 17 minutes away in Shanghai, in Shenzhen, and here in Hong Kong. This is the China Show. Happy Monday morning.
Tuesday, election night is here. Trust Bloomberg for up-to-the-minute results as the races for the White House and Congress are decided, as well as detailed analysis of what it all means for the economy, markets, geopolitics, and more. Tune in at 5 p.m. Eastern for an extended balance of power leading into full team coverage at 7, live from the Battleground States and Harris and Trump HQ. It's election night on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Right, welcome back to shows. The Monday morning, of course, lots on deck this week, including the elections. We're coming up a job report. Keep in mind, Tokyo is close. We do not have trading across cash treasuries. If you missed the action on Friday, the two-year yield, as you see when the jobs report came out, and then we completely reversed all those gains as far as the treasury story goes. Effectively, some of the Trump trades on your screens, you have 10-year bond futures, you have the VIX futures, the Mexican peso, Bitcoin as well. It's worth noting the dollar is slightly on weaker footing as we get underway, of course, this massive election week. How do we trade this in terms of fixed income? Where is the value? Joining us here on set is Shinyi Sun, head of fixed income ETF portfolio management at Mirai Asset Global Investments. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you make of that price move, the move we saw in treasuries on Friday into the close on the weekend?
I think it actually come out a bit of surprise for me as well, because I'm expecting a relatively weak job reports given the hurricane, given the strike, and it did come out quite weak.
Yep.
However, we see the market first it's react the job break quite on the right direction that I'm expecting.
Yep.
However, just shortly after it's going up again. I think probably the market is still trading the Trump 2.0. Given in the recent weeks, months, we are seeing the U.S. Treasury sell off. People are worrying about fixed income market. They are pricing in the Trump 2.0 effect. But if we look at the current level, you see the 2-year, 5-year is trading at 4.2 and 10 years trading at 4.4. That is pretty attractive for fixed income investors. And if you compare to what was it trading in July, where the 2-year, 5-year is around 4.1, 4.2. But back then, the futures market, they only price in 25 basis points. They only started to price in the 25 basis points Fed cut. But if you look at right now, Fed already did a jumbo cut, and with the weak job reports, I'm convinced that the 25 basis points Fed rate cut will come in November and December. So I think I'm quite comfortable to say that we will be seeing the yield moving down at least 15 to 25 basis points.
Was that jobs report weak enough to bring back those bets of a 50 basis point cut is one thing? Or do we have to really look at the distortions in this data and just blame it on bad weather and strikes?
I think we do see some noises from the bad weather and from the strike, and we are going to continue to see the noises even in the next job report. But I think from Fed's point of view, they need to employ some the two cuts on the track in order to see through the noises. And probably in January we can see a more clear picture, more clean data.
So I think so you think they'll cut by 25 and 25, right?
Yeah.
The next week. So in other words, is the direction of travel and yields will drop 20 basis points first? You mentioned that, and then if Trump wins, is that the floor? Do we see yields pick up next year?
I think in terms of the path, how the yield curve will move,
right.
I think there's room to move down like 15 to 20 basis points. Okay. But how the election results, whether Trump will win or Harris will win, it will probably lead to different directions. But I think we will find out quite soon this week.
So where do I favor on in the curve now? What part of it can you actually trade on given all this volatility?
I think if we're looking towards year end, I'm quite comfortable on the short end, the value of the curve, given it is already at a very attractive level with the sell-off. And I think we have less uncertainty at the shorter end, but for the back end, based on the the policy, I think whoever wins, they are going to issue a lot of debt. They are going to spend a lot. So that side, it will impact on the back end. But I think the surge of issuance will not come not likely to come within 2025. so I'm more comfortable on the shorty end of the curve.
What about opportunities in credit? Because we've seen spreads come in extremely tight. In fact, record low, I believe.
Despite Treasury selling off.
Despite Treasury selling off, yeah.
Yeah, indeed, the credit spread is in like a historically low level.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, we are continuously seeing the inflows into USIG. I think together, although the credit spread is tight and add up on the US Treasury yields,
Yep.
it still provides some comfortable level for some type of investors.
Beyond just the U.S., it's a big week for China with the MPC. We're expecting maybe we'll see some more stimulus on the fiscal side. How should I be looking at and positioned around rates right now in China?
In China rates, I think in the longer term, I still think because the China now is in the easing mode, they are still going to. I think I'm still on the positive side. Apart from the market predicted 6 trillion and 6 trillion local government debt swap.
Yeah.
I think they are going to employ different tools to support the liquidity in the market. So I think the China rates will still be lower for longer, and I think the 10-year government bond towards the year end maybe there's a little bit range bound, but if we look at longer term, I think it will go down further until lower than 2.2%.
I mean, there's a notion to, I'll put the two stories together, that if China succeeds in this, it becomes inflationary next year for the world. Is that a scenario that we should start discounting at this point, or is that still somewhat what is this? A mental gymnastics on my part.
I think we still need to observe more to have more like a higher level of confidence in that part. So I think this week is really important when we are seeing the result of the MPC. I think they will react depending on different election results, and if Trump wins, I think we may see more upside surprise, even on the direct consumption side.
Xinyi, thank you. Xinyi Sun there, Head of Fixed Income ETF Portfolio Management at Murray Asset Global Investments. Your pre-market in Hong Kong just opening up here right now. We're seeing some upside when it comes to stocks here in the city. We're up about 0.4%. AD futures are still punching higher here this morning. So it looks like it could be a pretty solid open here today, and more strength coming through for the currency here as we see the greenback retreating a bit. 710 levels this morning. Plenty more ahead. This is Bloomberg.
Right, welcome back. Futures are pointing slightly higher. Your pre-market is effectively pointing to maybe slightly higher open. Just keep in mind we're coming off we are currently on a 4-week skid as far as Hong Kong goes. Goldman Sachs just dropped this note. Kendra Lau, of course. They do see 20% upside for Chinese stocks. I think a lot of that will depend really on what type of numbers and details we get from this meeting this week. It starts today in Beijing.
Yep, their assumptions are 2 trillion yuan on that additional fiscal stimulus for this year that could be unveiled at this MPC meeting. So the policy reaction, they say, should be continual and dynamic. In terms of analyst actions to tell you about, we're watching the travel sector, in particular, Air China A shares cut to a hold at Daiwa. The solar stocks have been kind of all over the place, but LONGi Green raised to overweight at Morgan Stanley, and Costco Shipping A shares raised to outperform at Daiwa. In terms of stocks to watch as well, we are focusing on the travel sector, right? So there was this news that China will expand its visa waiver program to South Korea and 8 European nations, including the likes of Slovakia, Norway, Finland, Denmark. The list goes on. But you are seeing some of these travel stocks like Trip is up some 4%. It's a mixed picture though, but then you take a look at something like Hana Travel, for example, in Korea. That one is surging here this morning. And oil stocks just really continue to rise along with the price of oil after OPEC Plus decides to delay that output hike. We've got that open coming up. This is Bloomberg. back. You're watching the China Show. We're counting down the open of markets. It is a big week in terms of events, whether it's this U.S. election that's just a few days away, the NPC Standing Committee that is just underway this morning in Beijing. So a lot is hanging on these markets. But right now, stocks are actually doing pretty well. We're quite resilient here in the free market and Hang Seng. We're up about 0.4%. And really, take a look at the trading interest in these markets, Dave. In stocks, for example, if you look at margin financing, that's up for like 14 straight days, I believe. Take a look at things like people just looking at turnover. I think it's still pretty high right now. So there's still quite a lot of activity here, despite all this volatility that we're seeing.
I mean, the fact that, we keep talking about how, let's say, the statistic today sounds more dire than it actually is. Hong Kong stocks are down for a fourth straight week. I mean, the fact that it's actually held up and not retraced all the way low, all the way back down is a good thing, right? And I think Mark Cranfield has made really efforts to emphasize that point, that this isn't one of those fake outs that we've seen in recent, these bull market, these sort of cyclical trades up amidst the bear market, right? So, and a lot will depend on what these numbers bring. There's this dance between market expectations and what the standing committee might come up with as far as what they approve is concerned. And it looks like this is going to be a big number. I think Goldman Sachs just dropped this note, of course, earlier on that they do expect a 20% more upside here in Chinese stocks, depending on what that looks like. Now, as far as the market open goes, we are looking at, as you can see on your screens, just about almost a broad-based rally, 0.3 of 1%. The other big story, of course, is with oil prices, 1% in Shanghai. OPEC, of course, pushing back to the plans to bring more supply back into this market. This restart, as they say. Right, the open in Hong Kong is looking like this. So I think, fine, 4 straight weeks. The Hong Kong dollar is actually on the weaker end of the trading range of the last 5 weeks or so. So dollar Hong Kong is about 77, I'll be generous, 77.50 right now on the dollar Hong Kong cross. Mixed picture across some of the big names, bottom of your screens. Let's flip the boards, please. So in terms of earnings, we have Young China on deck today. We have some news out of BYD as far as, I think one of the company's executives came out over the weekend and said they did increase production. They're firing on all cylinders as far as capacity goes. 200,000 as far as the output goes. And just in case you're curious what that Y-Soft, that's the stock that's traded, of course, on short. That's this meme stock that sounds like Trump wins big in Mandarin. So we're down about 10%. And that is any indication of where market expectations think, of course, this election is going to go. But again, it's a coin toss.
It's always a good one to check, though, in terms of just where is the sentiment here this morning. For more, let's bring in our Asia equities reporter, Charlotte Young. She's with us here right now. There's so much suspense this week, given the U.S. election, given NBC. I mean, what are we bracing for this week?
Yeah, I think market's definitely bracing for a lot of volatility. Apparently, election the big thing, but I feel like investors for Chinese equities, particularly, are focusing more on the what kind of figure we could get from the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. Given whatever stimulus that comes was more important for the economic recovery, and also I think the word that analysts, strategists are highlighting, such as from Goldman Sachs, is that how resilient the market so far has been going in the average pump repricing. We actually didn't see a sell-off. And like you said earlier, for onshore, we're seeing the margin financing picking up at the highest level in over 2 years. And also, for example, like turning over, we have 3 sessions last week. So I think all of that indicates that interest is still there. This is what we're doing.
Our expectations to going into this NPC meeting.
I think if you ask that question, I guess a week or 2 weeks before we say that. But after recent pullback, I think the expectations coming down a lot. And we're also hearing from investors that they expect, the more consumer-focused kind of efforts may be coming later in December or next year in March. So for the upcoming one, I think we're just looking at more, measures towards, for example, the local debt swap plan, that type of thing.
Okay. Charlotte, thank you, Charlotte, for setting up the week for us, our Asia equities reporter, and just how important this week is really going to be for Chinese investors. Let's have a bit more perspective with Katie He, Head of Product and Strategy at China AMC Hong Kong. Katie, it's great to have you here. You've been talking to clients, you've been tracking these fund flows. What do you think is going to matter more this week? Is it going to be what happens domestically with the NBC or what happens with this U.S. election?
Well, generally, we believe that the direction of the market will predominantly depend on, how the Chinese government, how much strength they put in their stimulus.
Yeah, well, I was wondering, markets have been trading on Well, for one, the major policy pivot 6 weeks ago from China, and I mean, just this week, of course, we have expectations over what the stimulus looks like. How would you describe sentiment right now? How has that changed from your perspective? Because you speak with a lot of clients.
Yeah, so we just had a very thrilling month there with the policy pivot as well as the strong momentum in the growth expectations. And I would say in general, we've seen huge reversal in interest. Having gone through a period where client sentiment has been relatively cautious, we're now seeing a lot of inquiries around China strategies, clients willing to look into adjusting their strategic asset allocation. Ones that are kind of closing down their underweight in China, some others just simply increasing their existing allocation. And as you mentioned, right, amazing flow data. So we're speaking from the Hong Kong perspective. Just since September alone, across all China equity ETFs in Hong Kong, we've seen a cumulative of, I believe, around 2.8 billion Hong Kong dollar. And since we manage one of the largest China equity ETFs offshore, the CSI 300 here listed in Hong Kong, that one we got over 600 million US dollar alone. So huge interest coming back. And I think, despite there's still some kind of, divergence between, views on, how the extent to which the policy stimulus will roll out. I think in general, clients are saying, the worst is behind us. So generally, quite a positive sentiment going on.
How do you view what sort of sentiment like for clients maybe offshore? I'm just wondering, are you seeing people closing their underweight position now? Is there more confidence that maybe this is more than just some sort of tactical trade?
Yes, for sure. So some are already closing down. Some are taking their time to adjust strategically, as I mentioned. So, I mean, down the road, we do expect to see a lot more inflows coming in.
Yeah. What's the house view on the outlook? In
So
China?
our house view is quite positive again, in line with a lot of investors.
Right.
We believe that, the magnitude as well as the comprehensiveness of the policy package that we see is perhaps the most significant that we've seen, for a long time. And we see really a huge commitment from the China government in addressing some of the key issues that we see in consumption, properties, as well as equity markets. So up to 10 trillion yuan potentially in the stimulus package. That just gives us a lot of reassurance that the China government is ready to do whatever it takes to revive the economy.
What about, because you guys sit in a fairly unique perspective, because you sit, of course, with the Hong Kong office, so you see flows both ways. And I'm wondering, the sentiment has been challenging up until about 6 weeks ago, the last 3 years, right? And, have you seen a lot of demand from Chinese investors onshore for non-China strategies, for example? What's that appetite been like? What are the flows been like, for example, there?
Yeah, so there has been huge, interest, predominantly driven by, the growing segment of wealth clients, affluent clients in China, who are looking to kind of diversify away from China assets into, additional growth opportunities across the globe. And so, recent examples, we've seen huge ETF trading premiums happening in offshore China for US products, for Japanese products, for example, and these are the DM strategies. On the EM side, we're seeing a huge interest as well. So a lot of interest in things like India, for example, Southeast Asia.
From Chinese investors?
From Chinese investors. And that's really, been the driving force of how we kind of position ourselves in Hong Kong. We try to diversify our toolkit for clients. For example, last month we launched our India ETF in Hong Kong and has been, pretty well received.
What about sector themes? AI, is that still something that's big for next year?
I think a lot of the offshore investors are interested in AI, AI, clean energy, green energy strategies, more focused in China. And we've seen a lot of inquiries going into Stock Connect ETFs. As you know, we have a lot of products that are eligible under these Connect programs. So yes, growing interest.
So going into next year, so from the perspective of, I guess, where, and really who knows where markets go next year, but how are you guys planning the business in terms of product offering? What do you think is going to stick next year?
So for China AMC, our growth strategy is very much centered around, building a multi-solution all-weather, solution platform for the clients. And secondly, one of our growth pillar is to really leverage, Hong Kong's positioning as a super connector to China. And so in that sense, we've been actively participating in a lot of the connectivity programs like ETF Connect, Wealth Management Connect, and as well as MRF, mutual recognition of funds. So under this narrative, right, as I said, we try to kind of build upon our existing China capability and extending that to having a lot of global exposures. At the same time, I think apart from traditional assets, we've also been branching out into alternative assets or emerging business side of things. So 2024 has been actually a very exciting year for us. So back in April, we launched Asia's first Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF. Really well received amongst clients. And at the moment, we're also venturing into asset tokenization initiatives, which are led by Hong Kong and Made in Hong Kong. We're very positive about the growth opportunities in the Web3 space, particularly for asset managers.
Okay, well, Katie, let's talk again. And I'm curious to see if this bull market in China continues, how it might change flows and products as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great week ahead. Katie He there, Head of Product and Strategy.
我在我生日那天一路哭回家。
亲情可以让我破防哎，他会跟你说家里永远会有你的位置，
我绝对不会亏欠他这样子。
没有想到会这么快，我以为我可以忍住。
谁啊？先生你好，请问这里是六家吗？啊？什么林宥嘉？这也是六家没错啊。哦，什么林宥嘉啊？这就是我家哦。老师你订的啦？啊，不是啊，订了什么？订阅。
哎，你宝贝哦，调查怎么样？
我还没剪好哎。
还没剪好1个礼拜了哎，你好会剪哦。
那你看一下我剪的这支。
睽违5年，重返小巨蛋。林宥嘉 idol 2023世界巡回演唱会台北站，9月24中午12点 ，KKTix 全家发米破全面起售。
首先，大家对破防的定义是，
就是某件事情突然击破你的心理防线。
哦，
很标准，emo 到崩溃。
哦，emo 到崩溃是不是？
太感动的时候会破防吗？
哦，也可以哦，感动也可以哦，
打真伤。
打真伤啊，也对了对了，想问一下，你们知道破防是什么意思吗？
大走心大破防。
大走心了 ，PDF 是什么？
破大防。
破大防 ，OK。哇，原来是简写啊！
我觉得猫咪很破防啊，不觉得猫咪很可爱？
哈，这很破防。
这很破防。
那只猫是你自己养的吗？
对啊。
就是这只猫是不是？
对。
你把它撕在手上，叫什么名字？
它叫小笨猫。
为什么要取这个名字？
觉得像它，那时候觉得很酷啊。
你们上一次破防的时刻是什么时候？
我在我生日那天过12点，然后从学校回家的时候一路哭回家。
为什么？为了过生日不是一件开心的事吗？
因为我不想长大，
不想长大，
觉得自己在衰老，很难过。
同学，你现在几岁
？22。
干你啊！
那我们 OK 好。
完美诠释破防的瞬间。
那你们有破大防的时刻吗？对。同学，你现在几岁
？22。
OK， 好，谢谢。那我们 OK 好。
完美诠释破防的瞬间。
那你们有破大防的时刻吗？
其实呢，小弟我
最近在准备国考，然后呢，我就读了很久，跟我同学讲话，他讲什么我就想要法条，读到我就觉得我是智障了。然后我就想要祈求一个心理的安慰，我就去了双连的文昌庙祈求啊，去抽签啊。我想说，抽完应该心里会很有安慰。靠北，抽到那个科运味道，这次考试应该不理想，及早设好停损点。
那怎么办？
说到那瞬间，刚好天空有那个阿帕奇在打转，同学正迈向成功的路上，我正迈向成功岭的路上。
先去当兵这样子。
成功人士。
那同学，你最近有没有什么大破防的事情？
就是我们好像上礼拜吧，邀请一堆艺人，然后来这边唱歌啊，就类似一个
小演唱会。
对，然后好像不然喝的太多了，可以当个三峡水箭龟。
三峡水箭龟什么意思？就是你是说你直接让他们浇花，直接使用喷水？
对，然后之后还帮人把一个未成年的捡回家。
啊？什么东西？怎么把一个未成年人捡回家？什么意思？
没有，是之前也是去别的场，然后遇到的，然后他说，北大有办这活动，他想来，他来那边找我，就好像喝太多，赶不上末班车还是什么的，我就把他带回家了。
所以你从水箭龟带了一只杰尼龟回去？
对，
就像找到一个好的闺蜜一样。
那想请问一下，你们最近有破防的课吗？
亲情可以让我破防
对啊，亲情算是你的点。你跟你爸爸妈妈最近还好吗？
还好啊，我都住家里住了快要10年了。
爸爸妈妈感情算不错。
他会称呼他妈妈的名字。
对啊，本名2个字。2个字。
有什么可能美惠？
对，我就叫美惠，没错。
那你有曾经因为跟你妈相处被你妈妈感动到？
感动到哦。
有吗？
就是有一种他在做他自己想要做的事情，然后一定某一部分有所成就的时候，你会觉得，破防，我破防了的那种感觉，就是
OK
比起破防，我更好奇的是，你到底在爽什么？
那同学你有吗？最近一次破防的时刻？
爸爸妈妈讲什么话的时候吧？
是开心的吗？是开心的事吗？还是不开心的？
应该是温暖的事。
他讲的什么？讲爸不会。
不是那种，可能像是当你很繁忙在思考未来的时候，他会跟你说家里永远会有你的位置，就会觉得很想流眼泪。
因为你不是台北人。
我是台北人。
那你本来就会有个位置。
不是，因为是住在外面嘛，他在房间就变成美眉的。
那他没有留你的位置啊，他就可以美眉了。
不是，是心灵上的。
再来是一群排球少女们。
那你们最近有没有遇到一个大破防的时刻？
扣球没扣过。
排球是不是？
对。
那怎么办？
大破防。
而此时的他突然，
我看一下，他手机旁边就自在呢。
防不胜防。
最近有没有破防的时刻？
举球举太烂，而且那时候我是举球的，我脚大翻船，然后我就坐在场边哭。
我们来还原现场情况。
接球，那时候就翻下去了。
所以那时候你到底哭了？
对啊。
你是因为痛才哭，还是因为觉得？
我就觉得打太烂，然后很丢脸。但是因为教练在旁边，他刚好就看到了。
然后呢？他怎么样做这个事情？
他跟你说你忘记说。很尴尬。
而同样悲惨的还有
同学有没有？就刚才都没有发言，来一个。
我的脚也翻船，但是因为我踩在平地就翻船了。
辛苦了。
有一个小船说翻就翻。
你最近有没有一次破防的时刻？
就是上学期，因为我是在社团，我那时候晚上不知道是喝到哪一杯很恶心的酒还是怎么样，我就觉得很冷，风还很大，有点嘴唇发白了，我觉得快死掉了。然后那时候现在是男朋友的他就是说你要不要穿一下我外套，然后就那时候就心里就被暖到。
所以后来你们两个就顺理成章在一起了。
哦，不是，是我只求睡他，因为我很常跟他借外套，然后我就会把它倒一洗，然后之后再拿给他，一来一往就顺理成章在一起。
没想到这个外套就是你们两个定情之外套。
哦，对啊。
论带套的重要性。
同学，你们最近有没有什么破防的事情？
我觉得就是可能在大学校园里看到太多情侣搂搂抱抱了。
我们之前有听说，是不是有什么叠叠乐？
所谓的叠叠乐就是
女生宿舍1楼每天都会有情侣，就是在叠叠乐。
叠叠乐。
坐大腿，然后整个抱在一起。你说我们宿舍楼下真的超多，就是那个椅子上基本上都会坐满不同的情侣，你每天看到都会是不同队。假如我是那个男生，然后那女生就直接坐在上面，然后就开始享受自己的至少4组。
那你们看到的时候心情怎么样？
破大发。然后根据这种陋习啊，我们先占领那个地方。对。
你先把位置抢走，他们没得坐。
对。
所以你看到他们这样子卿卿我我坐，你没想到说有一天
这机会会轮到我。
每天都在想啊，
每天在想找出机会啊，打排球的男生不行吗？
可以啊，可以啊，超可以。
那怎么样？为什么没有去认识一下？有啊，
完全没兴趣。
那同学你呢？上一次觉得破防的时刻？
今天凌晨就是一些人际关系上面的问题，交友圈太广，然后可能就是疏忽顾及于每一个地方，就可能这边漏掉一些，这边漏掉一些，但可能就有人会反噬我。
每个科系都有你认识的，
几乎可以这么说，北大是每个系都有一个我的位置存在。
OK， 你想要建立北大交友圈？
对，北大交友圈，我们出社会以后人脉是靠我们大学建立的嘛。
哇，这么讲真好。那想问一下，这位同学对来讲有什么梦想？
这位同学对我来讲，他今天陪我一起来受访。
哦，那这位同学对来讲，
那是我们系上好朋友，而且我们应该都台中人。
那这位同学呢？
我们社团的，我们是一起唱歌的。
哦，所以你们俩都不会唱歌？
我还好，可是他不会唱歌。
哦，在我们这个大舞台唱一下，也许星探之夜。
真假的？太伤哎！
我只给20秒
，20秒，是不是？好，副歌，
来，大家打拍子。
6、7、8，飘向北方，别问我家乡，高速公路。
2.2公斤。
今天就往这边结束啦。如果你还想要看多，
变压器2.6公斤，携带超方便。
好 ，Rio 中啊，各自觉得哪一块比较容易被破防？我觉得如果是生气的那种破防的话，我这个人的防线蛮薄的，蛮多东西可以破防。天气热我就被破防了。周来是很天气，我觉得我可能问的是桌子的防線。好，最近一次感受到被破防是什么？
我看一下。
居然有小抄，你连这个又有阅历了，哇！这是真的你近期破吗？白痴，等下这是重复的，你这是复制，他这样都重复的了。周来自己来讲1-2个破防比较严重，好不好？
那个 Evan 穿我的洋装，然后他们在笑说好像水果奶奶。3、2、1。
谁啦？一个一个抓出来。
然后还有主委说我是大冤，
我都不知道迪卡那么厉害，可以请到重量级来宾，这个顽童的大冤。
台湾街要看你看，
开笑啊！
待机状态按一下，只要7秒。
那我是太困
第一，我们特别派的专车去接他，然后派客车接他。
哇，你讲话记住真的是过分。
又在赛车，
还有另外加入
只有要继续补充。
我最近有一次跟我爸大吵架，反正那一次是我们家要装网络，跟我妈在研究那个网络弄半天，然后我爸就说啊没差啦，我手机连上网络啊这样就好了。然后我跟我爸就因为这件事情有点吵架，这个是大家连 WiFi 的，啊你有吃到饱，我们其他人没有，吵一吵我就觉得说爸爸你又不懂，然后我就把他手机的行动网络关掉，然后他就很生气说啊你怎么弄我的网络也没了，我说啊你不是不要装 WiFi 吗？你不要装 WiFi 就是这个样子啊。然后我就跟我妈说你不觉得爸爸这样他都不能同理其他人，然后后来他就跟我说，其实你爸爸中风之后，他的很多言语都跟以前不一样，你要去思考说为什么他以前可以理解，但你现在不能理解。然后我那个当下就哇脑袋一片空白，就是会觉得说也是，就是以前的时候他好像可以跟我们吵一吵，理解我们在做什么事情，可是现在是他没有办法理解，然后我刚才这样凶他，我觉得这算是我最近发生一件事情，是让我觉得我好后悔。你觉得爸妈的衰老不再只是身体上，而是可能头脑或对话上面都会有。对。
好，我觉得不然就断在这啊，
就断在这吧。Hello， 大家好，我是 Andy。你觉得什么东西比较容易破你吗？
但是理智断线。
哦哟，对不起，然后跟我没关系啊，对啊，什么事情？
那是跟你
真的跟我有关哦。
反正就是那天月友就回来，就跟我说，你知道今天我们去采访的时候，就是有一个同学说反口接下来长得很像大叔，我觉得这种不要乱讲。
好，对不起。
你看大叔。
我靠！我大叔人生，我直接跟反口接长齐名哎！
就有人就在旁边一直说我是低卡反口的。
史蒂卡尔启德，再来是启德的感性时间。
Radiolab is supported by Progressive Insurance. What if comparing car insurance rates was as easy as putting on your favorite podcast? With Progressive, it is. Just visit the Progressive website to quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's direct rate, then their tool will provide options from other companies so you can compare. All you need to do is choose the rate and coverage you like. Quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Listener supported. WNYC Studios.
And the boys are, yeah, I will tell you more about it when we don't have a clock running, but it's good.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so, okay.
Yeah, okay. Oh, well, we should say this is Radio Lab. I'm Latif Nasser.
And I'm Lulu Miller.
And you have been on maternity leave, and you still are on maternity leave, but for some reason you have come back for a minute.
I'm emerging from the pajama land of maternity leave because I have some news. I have some exciting news, which is that Terrestrials is back. Yeah, we've got a whole new season of our family-friendly nature show. Just dropped. It is just out. 7 new episodes. 7 new romps through nature. 7 new wild stories.
Yeah, with with animal and historical and scientific detours that are musical detours most of all.
Through all kinds of, we got an episode about squirrels coming up. We got an episode about deep dwelling sharks. We got an episode about lichen.
I'm liking it.
So yeah, that's what I'm here to tell you. If you like nature.
And how often and where do they find it and how often does it come out?
You head on over to the Radiolab for Kids feed where there is stuff coming out all the time, basically every other week. Right now we've got that's ramped up a little. We got stuff coming out every week. And you just look for the Terrestrials episodes. And if you make your way through those, there's other goodies waiting there. And that, again, the Radiolab for Kids feed. And there will be stuff on all year, and all kinds of surprises coming out throughout the year.
That's so great. I'm so excited. Congratulations. But also you have something you are presenting to us right now.
Yeah, no, right. I guess to celebrate, we are going to give you a taste of the first one, which just came out.
It's so fun. It's such a fun episode. I mean, it's like you've made something dead alive, which I think is so fun to listen to.
It's a thing that seems dead, but maybe is less dead than we think. Yeah, so take a listen.
Wait, you're listening?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
You're listening to Radio Lab.
Radio Lab.
From
WNYC.
See?
Yep.
Three, 2, 1.
Imagine you standing in the middle of a forest. Your arms break off and your insides hollow out.
Your skin turns hard and rough.
Humans think of you as being dead, like a ghost.
But the birds and insects and rodents know the truth about you.
Inside, you're brimming with life.
You birth babies.
You fight fire.
You can even catch time. You have become
a stunt.
Now is the part where I make you sing the theme song with me.
Oh, God. Okay.
Terrestrials, we are not the worst, we are the
best.
Terrestrials.
Yeah, you got it. Terrestrials is a show where we uncover the strangeness waiting right here on Earth. I am your host, Lulu Miller, joined as always by my songbud, Alan.
It's the episode.
And this season, we are looking at things that are usually And today's guide through the wild world of tree stumps is Scottish artist, writer, and tree expert, Amanda Thompson.
I don't see myself as being an expert in trees, maybe more a lover of trees.
Now, Amanda grew up like most of us, not really noticing stumps. Or if she did, noticing what they weren't.
Trees are for climbing, aren't they?
Can't build a treehouse in a stump, can't get shade from a stump.
No.
So stumps seemed like broken things, sad things, dead things. Until one day, she happened across a stump that would cast a sort of spell on her.
今天要让大家假扮成 AI 聊天机器玩具，在高雄这间超酷的整人玩具店， 要来吓吓客人，那就走吧，Go， 耶 Go， 看什么看呐、
不要忘记我的假手哦。完成。
耶
耶！他带你们介绍吗？这只是那个最新科技的，全世界第一只可以自由跟人类聊天的 AI 机器人哦。
不知道。
对，它完全声控，你只要对它说开机，它就可以开机。嗯，
开机。
你好，我是智能鹦鹉大呆。
Hello。
你好。
很聪明。
你会说话吗？
他是不是讲给你听了？
你在开玩笑吗？我真的会说话呀。
100减22，
100减22等于73。你要带我回家吗？
我想一下。
它有那个人体。
你要带我回家吗？减22等于73。你要带我回家吗？
我想一下。
它还有那个人体智能感应的功能，对啊，你可以手伸出来呢，给它测试一下。智能感应的功能，对啊，你可以手伸出来呢，给它测试一下。其实是我在说话，
真的哦？
对，
对啊。
但是我的是副语师，
瞬间讲话。
你好啊。
对，
厉害了，
是我是副语师，我在帮他说话。那我们再拍一个有趣的小短片，所以有录影。
你好，我是智能鹦鹉大呆。
What's your name？
我的名字叫做大呆。
我公平义啊。
My name is 大呆。
有，你属什么的？
我属鸡。
看得出来。172加632。
234。
我是不是132？
会简单一点，不要考倒自己。
我连自己都不会哦。
把手心往上，然后伸到他前面，他就可以侦测，你试试看，侦测这个人的智商有多高。
你好，我是智能鹦鹉大呆。
你会吃饭吗？
我不会吃饭，我是机器鹦鹉。
很聪明。你会说台语吗？
一点点。
那你会说什么？
关尾调。
伸到他面前，他就可以侦测出这个人的智商有多高。其实是我用字的，有相信他是真的玩具吗？
有。
开机。我是智能鹦鹉大呆。
Beginner series.
Quiet, dead-seeming stumps, completely differently.
They don't look like they're doing anything, but they're doing so much.
All right, so like most good fairy tales, this one begins in the woods, the deep, dark woods of Scotland. Amanda is staying in a friend's cottage, taking care of the chickens, and one day she decides to go for a walk in the ancient pines. And she walks deeper and deeper into the dark until suddenly a stump catches her eye.
It was very pale. A lot of the bark had fallen off of it, so it was almost silver.
It was a kind of stump called a snag, where part of the tree still stands, but it's hollow inside.
All of the upper branches had snapped.
And as she studied its kind of spooky form, the giant stump began casting its spell.
I just started to notice all these dead trees in the middle of all the life that was going on.
And without really knowing why, she got out her camera and began taking pictures.
They're almost like skeletons.
Can you say any more about what drew you to them at the beginning?
I was just drawn to their difference.
She related to that feeling.
So when I was growing up, I was about the only black kid in a small town. I had such a lovely childhood, but there's moments where you are made to feel different, you know, and you experience racism. And whether it's intentional or unintentional, you still feel it. So when I was starting to look at the dead trees and trying to think about what they meant for me,
they reminded her a little of her. And she wanted to extend a kind of care to them that she didn't always get as a kid.
there's a lot of kindness that comes when people start to understand the value of difference and what difference can contribute, if that makes sense.
And so, she kept spending time with these dead trees, trying to get to know them by taking pictures of them.
They're beautiful shapes.
And drawing them.
Made some films
of dead trees, etchings of dead trees, sound recordings of, you guessed it,
dead trees.
But her understanding of the value of stumps really clicked in when she started following scientists on walks through the woods. They peeled back the bark, so to speak, and showed her just how many
different beasties that are there.
Beasties like beetles and wasps and mushrooms and flies.
They hold so much life within them.
The scientists taught her there's a whole class of creatures that need stumps to live. They're what's called
saproxylic.
Saproxylic?
Uh-huh.
It means they would die without dead wood. These are creatures like fungi that slurp up crucial nutrients out of stumps, kind of like a wood smoothie. Or beetles that lay their babies inside. Or wasps that chew stumps to create nests. And sometimes stumps break apart to create whole new worlds.
Sometimes in the holes, like, you can get water as well, so that creates another microhabitat.
Like a little pool, a little pond in the dead tree?
Yeah.
And while wasps and beetles might sound kind of annoying, without them you'd lose pollinators and little magicians that turn rot into crucial nutrients for the forest floor, and you'd lose food, crunchy snacks for bigger creatures. In short, without stumps and deadwood, the forest ecosystem would pretty quickly collapse.
Studies reckon that a healthy forest needs 30% deadwood in order to be a healthy forest.
Oh, that is so much of the forest.
Absolutely.
But Amanda was just getting started. She would go on to spend the next 20 years studying stumps.
Yeah.
And is now going to take us on a tour de stumps, a world tour of stumps doing things I would never dream they could. Saving lives, creating cities, and even changing the sky.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
The tour departs the station right after this short break.
Radiolab is supported by BetterHelp. Masks and disguises are big this time of year, with many of us out shopping for that perfect Halloween costume. But do you ever feel like you wear a mask maybe more often than you want to in life? In your relationships, in the workplace, or in a social setting? Well, therapy can help you to learn to accept all parts of yourself so you can take the mask off. After all, masks should be for Halloween fun, not for our emotions. So, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Therapy can arm you with the tools you need to live your best life, helping you learn things like positive coping mechanisms and setting effective boundaries. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Visit BetterHelp.com/Radiolab to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Radiolab.
You probably know fairy tales like Cinderella and Little Red Riding Hood. But did you know that the original stories weren't quite so cute? The Grimm fairy tales were weird and sometimes gross and often scary. In the podcast Grimm, Grimmer, Grimmest, you can listen along with a group of other kids as I tell them those tales. You can listen to Grimm, Grimmer, Grimmest wherever you get your podcasts.